First question is, where did you grow up? What were your interests growing up? And how did you get into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I actually really like this idea of like where you're from and how that leads to where you are and where you're going. I think that not enough people are asking about this. So, and I think I have a unique situation in that I grew up on a farm in northern Minnesota. So I kind of say I grew up out in the woods with a single mother raising 2 kids and low income situation, like growing food, eating our own food and animals and that sort of thing. And so although I have 2 parents, they were divorced early, and both my parents super hard workers. My dad has worked for himself a lot of the time. I think you hear a lot of entrepreneurs talking about a parent was entrepreneurial, and a lot of times that leads people to see that that's an option. Although I definitely did not make that connection that anywhere near childhood or that early in life. So grew up kind of out in the woods and worked hard. I think that was a big thing that I picked up right away was, we were literally splitting wood, feeding animals, throwing hay bales around, weeding gardens, that sort of thing. So when we, as we get to talk about things like Second Shift and other projects that I've taken on that require a ton of work, I have not shied away from that. I've always been someone that can go into work and say okay, whatever it takes.
That's awesome.
But what sort of led me into my professional career is that I was also into psychology at an early young age.
Okay.
So when I was a teenager, my favorite magazine was Psychology Today, and I would just I subscribed to it and just eat those up and read about how people were communicating with each other, and that was the foundation for pretty much everything I've done since then. So
that's awesome. So it all goes back to grew up on a farm, interest in music, and then psychology. Right?
Yeah, and I think there's one other thing that's worth mentioning, that is, as I've now understood more about race and culture, and obviously race is a huge issue today and has been forever. Being biracial and growing up in an all-white community, we're now starting to see these articles and think pieces about what being biracial means in the United States, and how being, speaking a different language or different things. And so when people are in a situation where they have to adapt pretty much all the time, so if nobody ever looks like me and I'm always having to be the one to adapt, you become pretty vibrant, and you become pretty resilient in terms of navigating those situations.
Right.
And so I think I was always interested in how do I work through these situations? Okay, I'm a little different. Does that have to be a thing or not a thing? But you start to learn skills about how people interact. And I have built my professional career on how people interact with each other. And so I think that, without knowing it, that was that other precursor to that, was I want to know how to move through these various situations, whether I look like everybody, fit in or not.
So the next question would be, how do you define entrepreneurship?
Yeah, it's a really good question. How do you define entrepreneurship? I've asked other people the same thing too, so I could share different viewpoints on it with my students. For me, personally, I think it's about determining your own outcomes, determining what your life looks like. It does, you're gonna work a bunch of hours, you're gonna have moments that you don't like your job, just like anybody else. You're gonna have financially happy moments, and you're gonna have financially hard moments, just like anybody else. And so there's a lot of things that are the same, but the big difference for me is I am the one that's choosing that I am in those moments. So it's not like I want to be maybe financially tight at any given moment, or it's not like I want to be stressed out because I have to deal with something that's difficult in the work that I've created, but I am happy that I got to choose that outcome.
Right.
So for me, it's the fact that when I have to mop the floors here at Second Shift, and I just want to go home and eat dinner, but I got to one more time mop the floors, I still behind that am these are my floors, and I'm the one that's responsible for them, and that to me is worth it all. So there's lots of different ways. I mean, you could say it's getting to work a bunch of hours for yourself so you don't have to work for others. It's crafting your day-to-day however you want it. Some people like to say it's sleeping in whenever you want, going on trips whenever you want. It's definitely not, for a lot of people it's not that. Most of us are not Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg, and even those guys probably have more responsibilities than anybody recognizes. So the responsibilities, the ups and downs are all still there, but you are choosing to enter them or not.
I see.
Yeah.
That's a great definition. Thank you. So our next question would be, Can you give us background on how Second Shift came about? Like, what were the beginnings of going into Second Shift as a co-working space? And then why and how did you get into co-working, basically?
Yeah, great question. I'll actually answer the second question first.
Okay.
Before Second Shift, when I started my first entrepreneurial venture, it was a consulting company with two of us called Bold Bee Consulting.
Okay.
And so I started Bold Bee Consulting with another woman, and we were trying to do team building consulting, what I had gone to school for. Along the way, we were, registering an LLC, trying to make a bank account or not, deciding whether we needed a bank account or not, trying to find clients, obviously trying to sell, trying to develop products, making a website for the first time, things I had never done before, never thought about before. Those moments were difficult. It was hard. Entrepreneurship is hard. There's not like a guidebook. You don't just flip over like, this is what you do first, this is what you do second. I mean, there are some waypoints, like you need a bank account, you need an LLC, like you need certain things. But a lot of it is dependent on your situation, your skills, your goals, that sort of thing. So without getting too far into that, I started building this group called Coffee and Conversation. Over 3 years of me trying to build my own business, I also built a group of people around me and brought people in so they could benefit from one another of answering questions around what does entrepreneurship look like. And so we were hanging out, literally just having coffee and talking. So Coffee and Conversation was people getting together and hanging out monthly, building community, like we talked about earlier, and around the idea of building your own outcomes.
Right.
And it wasn't necessarily all entrepreneurs, there's some intrapreneurs, some innovators. I have a full-time job, but I am entrepreneurial inside of my work. Some people like that. Some people trying to launch their own ventures. And I was doing that, and it was going pretty well. Like 10 people would show up, 15, 20, 30, 40 people would show up on a week Saturday morning to hang out and talk for free, for their own volition, for their own time. There was no like Eventbrite to sign up for. It was just people that kind of knew where we were going. It was word of mouth. There was like a Facebook event. Eventually we made like a website, Twitter, that sort of thing, some social media to back it. But really just to organize, like I would pick the time and place and people would meet at that time and place.
Right.
And that, it's still going. A guy named Carlos Correa is running it now. It's awesome. I handed it off to him when we launched Second Shift. So Coffee and Conversation is still going. That's all to say that I was building community and seeing the power of it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, simultaneously, kind of on her own, Nicole Vasquez, my business partner here, was launching The Shift. And she, just like you had said, she had gone to 1871, been like, wow, co-working is awesome. What if there's another way to do this, another model? So she launched her own co-working space. And she was building The Shift, I was building Coffee and Conversation. We met because of those two ventures being similar to each other. And I would just go to The Shift and say like, hey, have you tried this community lunch? Or have you thought about portraying some information in this way? Or have you thought about bringing people together in this sense? Because again, I had gone to school for organizational development, which is how do people interact with each other inside of a space. She was building a space and I was really impressed by her work. And I was really interested in like contributing and supporting what she was doing, just for the fun of it, because it was interesting to me. So fast forward, March of 2016, Nicole came back from a European co-working tour and she came to a Coffee and Conversation. So we were at CNC, which is why I mentioned it. And there was the background behind all of this. And she said, Levi, look at all these people here. You've brought all these people together. You're building community. She said, I'm ready to start another The Shift location. I want to do another co-working space. But the way we're doing it would be highly management intensive. We need somebody who's the pinpoint, the key point, like she's been at The Shift.
Yeah.
She said, I think you could do it. You've been, a big supporter of my work. Do you want to start one in Logan Square? Funnily, I think the first thing I said was, no, I don't want to do that. I was like, that seems like too big of a deal. I was like, Coffee and Conversation is working. It doesn't need four walls per se. Community is more than, the space and the tables and stuff.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, I think I'm good. And she just kind of pressed a little bit and she was like, what, imagine what that would be like. Imagine what you could do. And I sort of thought about it and very quickly on, I was like, yeah, that sounds like a cool idea. Let's look at the numbers and stuff. We kind of wrote a business plan, a one-page business plan, and the rest is sort of history. So
awesome.
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry, I'm very long-winded.
No, that was great. I mean, I think we needed to know how it all came about, and that's important to your story.
Yeah.